أعوذ بالله من شر الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله آل الله وأما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. قال إمام حسين عليه السلام الناس عبيد الدنيا والدين لائق على ألسنتهم. Tonight is the fifth night of our discussions on the ways in which we relate ourselves to the great event of Ashoura. We propose that there made in a major two different approaches to relate ourselves as Muslims to Imam Hussein's uprising. The major historically popular ways in which Muslims related themselves to Imam Hussein's uprising was the emotional relationship. In mourning and performing their sadness, they relate themselves to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. The second was the sort of relating themselves in terms of thinking, in terms of finding thoughtful ideas, thoughtful issues in Imam Hussein's teaching and Imam Hussein's revolution, and trying to practice those thoughtful ideas. So we haven't reached to discuss any of the second approach, and we're still in the first sort of way of dealing with Ashoura. Tonight I would like to remain in this first approach to explain a little bit about the history of Azadari, the history of mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, to bring some helpful thoughts, helpful ideas to explain why Muslim in majority remain to connect themselves emotionally to Imam Hussein's uprising. In other words, I would like to talk about the structure of a organized mourning among Muslims, and to discuss historically how this organization was built and how this organization functions, and how the function of this organization affects Muslim society's faith, politically, socially, and ideologically. It is very obvious that right after the death of Imam Hussein and his companions, the practice of mourning was begun. First of all, it began among the household of the Prophet, among the remaining of the Ahl Bayt, from the very beginning of the date of the killing. It continued and it expanded and it extended in terms of time from one day mourning to the 10th day of mourning, and the event was popularly celebrated by Ahl Bayt and the one who loved Ahl Bayt, the Shias and the non-Shias, the Sunnis that who praised and who loved Ahl Bayt and Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So this was because I mentioned that the amount of the tragedy was clearly shocking, and this put Muslim society into a stage of shock. So this shocking needed to be expressed. The expression of the state of shock was to mourn, to be their chest, to cry, to perform in several different ways of common practice of mourning among Arabs. After the immediate member of the household of the Prophet, the remaining of the household of the Prophet, the other people, the Muslims outside of a family relation, they were absolutely they were saddened by this disaster, this tragedy. But during the time of Umayyad Caliphate, the public mourning was banned. No one was allowed to mourn publicly for Imam Hussein. This issue had a social and cultural backlash. The banning one social practice would increase the possibility to sort of send the practice underground in a very stronger wave. So during the Umayyad Caliphate, there were places among Shias and Sunnis who loved Imam Hussein. They were practiced. They would mourn the death of Imam Hussein and celebrate his life. In the places underground, they would try to hide their mournings, but this attempt of hiding mourning was a kind of bringing the suppressed anger among Muslims against the decision of Umayyad to oppose the public ceremony of Muharram. Among the after the dynasty of Umayyad, we have Abbasid. Abbasid dynasty was taking a different approach to to this problem, or this issue. They allowed only mosques gathering. People would be allowed to gather in a mosque in a very controlled way of mourning, in a very controlled way of on the speeches were presenting, but it was a possibility for Muslims to gather in mosques and celebrate the death of the grandson of the Prophet. Sultan Mu'izz ad-Dawla from Al Buya, or the Buya dynasty, was the first who recognized and allowed the public ceremony, the public ritual of Ashoura. He ordered the businesses and the offices to be shut down for the 10th day of Muharram, which is the day of Ashoura. And he allowed a very public gathering of Muslims to celebrate the death of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And then so basically from Mu'izz ad-Dawla's time, every year the gathering was becoming bigger and bigger, and the sort of participation of people were in terms of their involvement was deepening, and the sort of the creative aspects of the celebration was amazingly expanding. So the involvement of art, such as poetry and the performative arts, such as walking in the street and beating the chest and presenting their sort of mourning, was renewing every year, and day by day the practice was focused heavily to be creative. And finally, in the Safavid dynasty, the publicity of Ashura, the publicity of mourning for Imam Hussein was the main thing for Safaviya or Safavid dynasty. In the Safavid dynasty, we move from a very prohibited mourning from the Umayyad dynasty to the becoming the main and the major theme of political and social cultural phenomena. So what they did, they tried to organize from many different aspects the mourning of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So one of the things that they have done, they tried in Safavid dynasty's era, they tried to see the soul, the spirit of mourning, and the performativity and the outside, the form in terms of a piece of art, the form of mourning. So they paid attention enough to the form of mourning. So they created group performance or group performing activity, not only going to the streets and mourning together and beating their chest, but also carrying different elements of mourning to present how they're mourning or how saddened they are by the arrival of Muharram. In terms of paying attention on the soul of mourning for Imam Hussein, I don't mean that they went after the sort of the cause route or the motto or the essence of Imam Hussein's revolution. No, Safavid kings, they did not want to at all. They did not want to get even close to the philosophy of Ashoura and to see why Imam Hussein sacrificed his life. What they wanted to do with the soul of this is to legitimize mourning religiously, to bring religious sources to help them, for people to get involved, not for the love of Imam Hussein, but for the love of religion. Not because Imam Hussein was the grandson of the Prophet, but because of they wanted to create this, because of the order of the religious order. So they attempted to collect hadiths, the saying of the prophets and the saying of the Masums, that crying for Imam Hussein was a key to enter the Jannah. I'm not a religious scholar to give you a review of those hadiths, and I'm very sure that there are other scholars that they, at least in past couple of years, started to speak out about some of the hadiths that doesn't have enough historical evidence or background. So the hadith is that talking about how easily someone can wash away all the guilt he gained through years of committing sins, going to paradise, but by only crying for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So this is a major change in the time of the Safavid dynasty, that Ashoura and the practice of mourning became a new religion. By this I mean that if someone is Muslim, practically and ideologically, for him or for them, getting into paradise is not an easy issue. You have to watch for every single words you say. You have to watch for every single deed you have done, you do. Everything is counted for. It's not something that you can easily get away with all the different past you may have. Everything is counted for. You know, we have a verse in Quran says that every single deed, every single word that you say is going to be counted for. You're not easily allowed to go to paradise. You'll be punished for the wrongful deeds and words that you use. But Safavid dynasty brought a different understanding, different interpretation of mourning. Mourning became a place, a center, a gate to enter through mourning to paradise. This was the beginning of a long historical change in the ways in which people was mourning for Imam Hussein's death. That beginning was the establishment of an organized mourning, the structural organization of mourning. So this organization had its philosophy, and the philosophy was that if you mourn for Imam Hussein every year, 10 days, you don't need to worry about whatever else you're doing. Financially, you need to feed not only the one who mourns for Imam Hussein in different gatherings in the different days of the 10 days of Ashoura, but also for the who participate practically to lead the ceremony. For the mullah who speaks, for the one who recite Sinazani's poems, for whomever becomes part of this organization, this organized mourning. So there was a financial section of the issue that people would love to participate in. As we know, the most amount of money that religious centers in Shia community mostly they make is the time of the Ashoura, the day of Ashoura, during the 10 days of the ceremony of the Ashoura. So financially, there was, the need and the necessity to take care of the financial needs, and we know this organization had its powerful financial body. The cultural and art aspect of the issue was paid enough attention in different countries in different ways, in Afghanistan, Iran, Egyptian, any Muslim country that you can consider. The ways that the culture was perceiving Shia, perceiving the death of Imam Hussein, perceiving the sort of the organization of mourning. They would perform their mourning based on the cultural values, based on the cultural activity and the cultural capacity. The art was involved very, very powerfully. As I mentioned, poetry, the poetry of Ashoura, the poetry of this tragedy is one of the finest poetry among Muslim countries. In Farsi, the poetry of Ashoura, She'r Ashura'i, it without doubt is the finest kind of ghazal, is the finest kind of love poem. So the connection of love, the performity of love, poetry in Ashoura created a total environment that in this environment we experience everything differently. This is a whole environment, speaks of the holy in the presence of the day of Ashura. So all this, the participation of poetry, the participation of art, the participation of culture, the participation of financial issue, all structured a very strong organization called Mourning Organization. And this Mourning Organization slowly was replaced for the event itself. We have an event taking place in the year of 61 of Hijri, or 680 in Christian calendar. So in the year of 680 we have a great event taking place, and the aim of this event or revolution was to reform the way Muslims practiced and the ways Muslims perceived Islam. But it happened eventually to become a organized mourning. This organized mourning replaced the main revolution and the main event. And from the event has nothing left anymore, unfortunately. Every year we have this organization that mourn for Imam Hussein for different purposes. I know that Muslims, when they participate, they mourn for Imam Hussein. But among this mourning, this organization works or functions to keep keep the essence of crying, the essence of mourning as the main projection, the main essence of Imam Hussein's revolution. I think I cannot finish what I'm saying, what I'm trying to say in this speech as well. So I have to continue tomorrow night. One more night I want to speak about the qualification of the organized mourning, and then inshallah from the other night I will start talking about how theoretically and intellectually we can engage ourselves to Imam Hussein's revolution. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.